themselves in the eyes of Alexander Isaievich, in the eyes of the Western world. And it caused people a lot of pain, because they weren't doing anything wrong. They were working in institutes, they were translating books, they were raising children, and then suddenly all the media started humiliating them. And the sense of guilt they tried to create was so painful that after 1991, in the 90s, there was a huge wave of suicides. People didn't know how to live their lives anymore. This information kept being shoved in their faces. They kept being told that it was their fault that people were being exterminated in the concentration camps, although they had nothing to do with it. And that is why people have mixed feelings towards Alexander Isaievich. And everyone understands that it was a terrible time, and a very difficult one. And this wound has not healed to this day. And even now, as we're talking, as I get back to those events.
So everyone, I mean, we see that, I think we see that everywhere in the world now, that guilt. In the West, in the United States, in Canada, there's a lesser phenomenon, I would say, than what you're describing, and lesser than what the German people felt after World War II. But there are accusations of colonialism and white supremacy and guilt over the terrors of history that brought all of us to where we are now. And I think that it's something that we all face in some sense as an existential problem. I mean, there are permanent existential problems: death, suffering, deceit, sin, and all of the catastrophes of history that, for better or worse, put us where we are now. And the issue of how each of us bear guilt and responsibility for things that were done by the culture that we're part of, say, or by our immediate ancestors, or even by our distant ancestors, that's a very difficult psychological question, because we're historical creatures. The existential psychologists following Heidegger, I believe, talked about that problem as the issue of thrownness, thrown as in Thrown. You're thrown into the world, all of us, and you're thrown into your culture arbitrarily. You're thrown into your family arbitrarily. You're thrown into your body arbitrarily. And we all have to deal with that. And figuring out how to do that individually is very difficult. I mean, what I was trying to do in Maps of Meaning was to bring this down to, and in my other books for that matter, was to bring this problem down to the individual level, because each of us, in some sense, have the capacity to do all the terrible things that anyone has ever done. And you see that manifest itself en masse very frequently. And that happened in the Soviet Union. It happened in Germany. It happened everywhere. Really, if you just have to look hard enough and long enough in some ways. And so I felt that it was necessary. It seemed to me, and this was, so the question is, what do you do about that? That